Welcome to the Urban Farmer Rewind. In each episode, I'll be joined by a farmer or guest to talk about what we heard on this week's episode of the Urban Farmer. Hit subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Now, let's jump right into it. It's the Urban Farmer Rewind. Week 2 was all about getting into planning, getting ready for spring, the startup phase, I think is what Curtis called it. It's that time in our area, which would be March, late February, early March, where you're transitioning from winter into early spring and getting everything starting to roll, starting seedlings and getting beds prepped, all that type of stuff. One of the big takeaways I took from this, and this still blows my mind mentally, and this will be reversed for you because you're in the Southern Hemisphere. But the key point of, and I don't know if all new growers would catch this, would be if you want to overwinter crops, you really need to be starting those seedlings in late July to give them time to get up to size, transplant into the field in September timeframe, early September, get enough day length on them where they can then go throughout the winter and more or less sit dormant in a lot of North American climates. And that just, it's hard. For some reason, I have trouble wrapping my head around that. The height of the season, July, peak summer, everything's going crazy, and you already got to be thinking ahead to winter because seedlings got to get started so those crops can get in the ground. And for you, how does your cadence work if you're thinking about winter crops? When do you need to make sure you get those in the ground so they can size up appropriately for those shorter, cooler, I think you have wetter days come wintertime?
Yeah, sure. So we're year round, but we still have that same phenomena with short days, dormancy in winter. So I guess this is the big challenge for new growers. We were the same as finding where's your window with your climate and a crop, if we choose any crop. It took us 2 years to find where's the window for beetroot. And in our paper pot transplanting episode, we talk about beets there in that story, and same for carrots. So it's peak summer in New Zealand. So I have 8 weeks to plant all of my overwintered beetroot and carrot. And if I don't, we won't have them. It just takes, this is the thing, in experience and hindsight, both necessary, and obviously we would all do things differently if we could go back. But yeah, finding, and I guess that's where internet, or especially other local growers, finding out from them where's their window. We all need mentors and other growers around us, and that's what Curtis was to a lot of us.
When you look at that prepping for winter, is it better? You're probably better if you had to err getting stuff into the ground too early or too late. Which way would you err?
Neither, but I'd go early. Yeah. Yeah.
If you're too late, it just stays small and never gets big until come spring.
Absolutely. So our cutoff is March 15, January. So if we go longest day, we're 2.5 months after the longest day. That's our cutoff date. And we have planted carrots every week of the year. They just never get up and get strong. They never ground cover, yet the winter weeds here grow like crazy, and we never get a yield off them. And then with cover crops too, if we go too early, they get too big, and then the winter grains flatten them on the ground. So there is a window, but if you have to choose one, I would go earlier. Okay. You feel crazy. It's the peak summer. It's sweltering hot, and you're planting winter crops.
Yeah, I think that's why it's a mind bender for me. I'm not thinking about, I'm not a farmer obviously, but I'm not thinking about what I want to harvest in November, December, January when I'm at the beach.
And I guess I'm saying the same thing again, but it's only through experience where you find your cropping windows, and then they're all, how much do you plant, all driven by your market streams, your sales. That's a big unknown in the beginning. The more information and the more experience you can get up front, you can't be a builder without doing a building apprenticeship.
Right. What was that little hack you gave? How many days after the longest day of the year?
2.5 months.
So 2.5 months in your latitude, that works for you to get your winter crops in the ground. If you're not in by that time, you're probably too late.
Yep, and this is outdoors. We're talking obviously greenhouses. You can go a little later. If I would err on the side of going a little later with greenhouse growing, say you're doing carrots. A friend of mine in Australia plants his winter carrots in the greenhouse a lot later, like another 6 weeks later.
Yeah, so really know your context. I guess this first year it's really tough, and that begs the whole question of your first year, do you even take on winter sales? I could make a case why you probably wouldn't want to because you might not know what you're even going to have, but you probably want to try and winter grow your first year so
Yep.
you can see how things go. And if you have somewhere you can sell it, great. If you end up just tilling it in, so what? It was a learning experience. It's the tuition of getting that knowledge. But I think that's one other huge takeaway I took out of the series with Curtis is things change throughout the year. Planting radishes in, or maybe not radishes is a good example, but planting salad mix in early April is different than June, is different than
Mm.
August, is different than September. So there really is that learning curve of your soil, your conditions, your climate, day lengths. Do you have any sort of season extension working for you? And how does that affect DTMs and the yields you're going to get? So then in future years, you can really use that information to try and secure sales more consistently.
And it's hard to start out in the beginning, but Kurt, I don't know where Curtis got the word optionality from, but he pushed it a lot. That's been one of the best processes for us. So we're peak summer. We just had snow on the mountain twice. It happens each summer at some point. So we're full noise in the greenhouses. Everything's fast. But with the snow on the mountain, our microgreens slowed down by a day. And the following harvest, they sped up by a day. So that's a 2 days difference. And we're sowing 3 times a week. And there's other things that you start to pick up too. I learned from a touring rep from a seed company. Every time we have a cold snap, the cucumbers throw multiple cukes because they're going into survival mode. So it's more work. We have to come back, pick them all off to leave them singles. You can't plan for the changes that come in the weather. You just have to be adaptable with it.
Yeah, adapt, have optionality, keep records so you
Mm.
can go back. And that was a huge takeaway I took out of doing that whole series with him. One other thing I pulled out of this was we had a little bit of a conversation of the danger of taking on more land than you need. You're somebody, you are land constrained, but how much is, if you counted the total land you have available that's flat, like how much land could you market farm on if you, all that like pasture right around you and stuff like that at your
We're
place?
just developing the last bit of pasture this season, which is expanding the greenhouse and putting in 16 new beds, and then there's no more flat land. So our beds are 50 foot. We'll have 180 beds, 185.
Okay. What are your thoughts on that after doing this for a while? You have all that experience with John Jevons, which biointensive is really about growing more in less space, not taking up more land. And there is this idea of I need more to produce more, and people just want more. I have half an acre, I want an acre. I have 2 acres, I need 10 acres, I have 10, I need 50. I think a lot of people in this mindset just want to tack on more land, but it's every acre you add, you 10x the workload you potentially have, assuming it's not just forest land sitting there unmanaged. So I love that reminder to check yourself and maximize what you have to the absolute fullest before you go adding land, or make sure you have market streams before you add land, because I think the first instinct is put more beds into production, but what's the ripple effect of that? What are the consequences, the workload? Can you actually sell all of that stuff? Are you prepared to crop plan it out and do all those things? So when you think of your experience in this phrase, the danger of adding more land than you need. How's that hit you?
Yeah, it's the same currently with the recession here, new greenhouse, and we've got a new supermarket. That the new supermarket, we're getting hammered. We're stocking a single fridge every 36 hours, and we'd love a double fridge, but that's not going to happen just yet. So right now we've got way more land than we need because the greenhouse is so productive. And I guess there's a pattern here. I saw it with Curtis. I saw it with Ben Hartman. Each season over the years, you see they're starting to drop the broader varieties and really nail down on just less varieties in the end. And it's on small scale. I picked this up from Curtis. It's got to be fast growing. If we move forward, we see Curtis drop every year. He's dropping crops. When I was working there, 2016, we were doing kale, paddy pan squash, greenhouses full of cherry tomatoes. And I know his last season he wasn't doing any of those. He wasn't at the farmer's market. He was at the supermarket. For us coming back to supplying the supermarket, that was a big challenge for us more mentally. But the fact that Curtis had already done it, he broke the ice for us. It just made it less fearful. And so currently we've got a lot of outdoor beds and cover crop because we don't need them, but we know they're sitting there. We just need to flip them and put them back into veg as the market stream allows us to. So we're excited that we can double our turnover again. Now's not the time. So yeah, I think 2015, Curtis had a lot going on.
Yeah, it's a lot with context. Curtis scaled back. You mentioned Ben, he's scaled back. There's other farmers that do well and expand. Eric Schultz is adding on more land at a separate farm. Ray Tyler's expanded out his operation. So it works both ways. And I think part
Sure.
of this is, how do you want the business to work for you? Ben, from my understanding of visiting his farm, talking to him, he doesn't want this massive farm with 10 employees and having to travel extreme number of miles to sell everything, because he ideally wants to sell it as close as he can right there in Goshen. And eventually you can only push so much into that market. So if you want to sell more, you got to go further and further out. And I don't think that really fit his context of just simplifying everything down. So I think it can go, it works both ways. But another thing Curtis hit on here, and it ties right into what you alluded to, is the danger of too many options.
Hmm.
Grow.
Oh yeah, I haven't. So that's brilliant. Yeah,
Yeah. And
I
it's just applying constraint. And when you apply constraint to any situation, it forces creativity, it forces innovation, it forces you to maybe think about the problem another way. And if you just think about adding beds, if I only had 50 beds, but I need to increase production, if my constraint is I can't add more beds, then I have to get really creative to say, all right, here's what I have. What are the things I could possibly do to increase production? And it dovetails into things like you talk about of using microgreens to bump up salad mix or something like that has a much lower production footprint, but can still get you the yield that you need. So this idea of you always want optionality, which is
mm,
good to give yourself choices to pivot, but you also don't want so many options, especially I think for somebody new. I think that's
sure.
where they really get into danger. I see a lot of new people who comment on YouTube, send me emails, whatever, and they follow you, Ben, JM, other people out there teaching in the farm space, and they're trying to almost do everybody's system instead of just stepping back and saying, all right, what's going to work for me? And maybe you pick one system that you identify with, you use that as a very rough guide. So I'm gonna do approximately what Jodi does. But obviously, I have to see if that works in my market in terms of the crops and all that. But it's when I try and do Jodi and Ben and what Firth Farm is doing with their no-till and start incorporating all this stuff that eventually it's so complex that you're just chasing your tail all day and not focusing on what you actually need to be focusing on, which is sales, marketing, and production.
I like the mantra from the holistic management framework, which is one of them I picked up, and it's been an influence on us, is to manage diversity as simply as possible. And you were about to fine tune this, but 2015, Curtis was doing a ton of YouTube, quite a bit of travel, just about ready to write his book. I'm sure his online microgreens course was up, plus running 5 backyards. His farm was five different places, and that's the positive of that is he didn't have a mortgage. But I got to know him pretty well. I know that it was a challenge for him running multiple titles. That's complex. You've got the landowners, that's complex enough. You've got to get to different sites. You've got multiple of everything to set up. And he in the early days he had everything in Weedmat, even the little internal paths. Everything was set on other people's property to be minimal work. And then home base, he didn't even have home base, I don't know, in 2015. Do you know when it was that he bought his house? I know that was his original lease.
I think in this series where we're recording, it's right around 2016 is when he bought that. I believe he was farming that property and ended up buying it from that landowner. But you're right. I know I can concur of everything you're saying. Dealing with this spread out number of plots. A bad example of the past is England with colonies all over the world. How do you manage all that when it's just so spread out? And that's the beauty of urban farming, is there's access to all this land, but you're absolutely right. It brings a lot of complexity down. All different plots, different soils, different water sources, different landowners, different neighbors. You're setting up the same thing. Like you said, it's not one irrigation system, it's 5 irrigation systems. So yeah, you're absolutely on it.
And then that was the form drives function, or function drives form. I'm still waking up. That drove where he planted stuff. He talked about high rotation and birotation. I didn't see him YouTube this one, and I don't know how much I should say, but not all his leases were a dream. One of his leases he lost peak season, and at that point he had wash and pack on it. And this is part of farming on other people's land. And so 2016, he had purchased that property and really pushed on expansion at home base, at the depot, the wash and pack, 2 chillers, office right by wash and pack, the greenhouse. That must have been a big change from, because when he visited us 2016, and although I was serious homesteader growing seed crops, 50 beds, what he liked about our site was that we were one site. It was one.
I think people undervalue the lift you get from having a comfortable workplace. Like you have an office where at the time he had a kitchen area. He was starting his seedlings in there, and his office was, sometimes it was in the kitchen, sometimes it was on the couch, and the wash pack wasn't all centralized. And if you just, it's tough because if you're new, you don't know what you don't know. So if you go try and build the best permanent system just on your own without some sort of consulting, you could easily build it wrong. So I get dealing with it the first year and just makeshifting it to say, all right, here's our actual workflow, our patterns. Where are we walking a lot? Oh, we wanted to put the wash pack here, but that means we got to carry stuff from all the way over there. That's a pain. Oh, but there's no power here. So initially you figure it out. I think in the beginning you just bootstrap it and make do and build something good enough, but then getting that permanency of, here's our system. We can start to build around this. And you have that. You have your wash pack now, and you can now train employees on it, get a workflow going. And it probably makes things so much easier than if it was just half-assed, spread out, which is what on a lot of newer farms or startup farms or farms that don't have the ability because they don't own the land to build something permanent.
And looking back, so it was 2016 was my first trip to Canada, and I just worked a week with Curtis. But that week, and I'd been working on a lot of other funds, but that week gave me, and I'll just rewind. I had been listening to every podcast as it came out, all of his YouTube content, everything. But that week gave me a lot of understanding as to the flow and the essentials on wash and pack. Now, what happens in our wash and pack hasn't changed in terms of the basic workflow: wash, spin, dry. But we were open to the south for the first 4 years, very rough access up to it. We had wood chips down, and in the rain, I couldn't get my 4-wheel drive truck to wash and pack. We had to carry it over the wood chips to the truck. It is what it is. You just got to start. And my friend's got a farm. He's 6'5", and he's in a 6'5" tall greenhouse doing microgreens propagation, and he's had his wash and pack in there. He knows it's not ideal, but he's made it work, and he's just built a really small functional wash and pack, permanent, on leased land. But he has a really strong connection with the landowners. I think that's with this model that we're talking about, farming on people's backyards. I think it's all about the people.
I got out of YouTube for a while, and part of it was just life got busy, and then I was trying to get back in. I didn't really have a space to do it. And one of the big barriers for me to start re-recording videos was I didn't have a setup. I didn't want to have to set up the camera every time, position lights, make it look clean, all that. And then finally, late last summer, in my warehouse, I just carved out a space and said, all right, here's where we're going to record. It's basically all there, so you can just sit down and go. And it just makes the job so much easier because there's not all that extras of having to do that all the time. And I think people who, like you said, you are in the startup phase or very early on, if you're just putting stuff together, washing out of buckets and stuff, it adds a lot of stress. You do what you have to do, but it's
Yeah.
hard. What do you think about this? Because this is a phrase that came up, and I love this. I don't ever remember him saying it till I re-listened. I don't want to do anything that doesn't add value. I want to plant, harvest, and market. And I think it's lean farming in a nutshell. That's really what Ben Hartman writes a lot about. Muda is waste.
Yep.
And if it doesn't lead to you ultimately selling it, you shouldn't do it. And you can explain this better than me, but a farm can become an infinite source of to-dos if you want it to, I'm sure. Like you could walk out today on your Saturday and spend all day, I'm sure, outside puttering around doing little tasks around the farm that could be done. But it comes down to, do you need to do them and do they pay? Can you talk about how and maybe it hasn't, maybe you're still succumbed to this, but have you matured throughout your years of farming and really gotten better at disciplining yourself to say, all right, I'm going to work on these things. These things can be let go. So you're not outside for 18 hours a day, and you do focus more on the higher value things, the things that pay in this scenario.
Sure. That experience is one of the more valuable things that we can all aspire to. Absolutely, there's dozens and dozens, or I should say hundreds and hundreds of tasks that could be done on the farm today or this season. So immediately, my morning around the farm is looking at everything that moves fast. So that's microgreens house, everything germinating in the field, perishable crops that need to be harvested before the sun is on them. Once they're in the chiller, we can process them at any point. I think it comes with experience to know what has to happen rather than what could happen. And so my when we run a big team, I'm like the orchestrator. My day is stop, start, stop, start. A lot of decision making, putting the essential tasks in front of people rather than just saying, "Oh, that." Someone might come to me and go, "Oh, we haven't done this," but my response might be, "Right now, it doesn't. It's not even on. It's not an important task. It's not essential. We have to be focusing on the faster moving parts, the management parts. Peak summer right now. I've got 5 greenhouses. It's more important to open the greenhouse as the sun gets on it than to make compost, for example." So my average day, we're in a different phase this year with a new supermarket. I don't want to rewind to COVID, but we are harvesting each morning, followed by planting. All the other tasks, we'll prioritize the rest of the list once we're through those tasks. And back in the day, we used to have a classic two days of 2 different days of harvest and deliver. It's through experience, and we've spread the workload, but also with COVID, everything stopped for us. We're in total lockdown. We started at the supermarket in fall, and then by deep winter, all our traditional sales outlets were back open, and so now we've added 40% extra sales. We didn't have the greenhouse. We only had 5 growing beds indoors, and we went right through that winter and several others. Let's say a 45% increase in sales, maybe 40, with no more land. It was our market streams that allowed us to sell more fast growing crops. And that's really when with the influence of Curtis's saying plant harvest market, that's about the time frame when I started to go, my working day is, have we harvested the fast crops? As soon as they're harvested and marketed, have we planted the fast crops? Then, and as soon as that crop list is in, it's okay. And the next crops, the next longer ones, maybe spring onions, carrots, coriander, etc., are those crops in, which we're not planting as often as the salads. And but by the time you've done that, it's time to start planting the fast salads again. So we'll peak summer, we're planting pretty much every second day, anything that is seeded. Not transplanting that often, but our salads are going in every second day, and we're harvesting every day.
So those are the priorities. So you approach the to-do list. This is a very classic to-do mentality. Here's the important things. Focus on those first. Once those are done, we can deal with everything else. But don't get distracted by everything else before you do the important things.
Sure. And I wonder what I know he had one full-time employee, but he had a lot of people coming, not to work on his farm, but in his education space, he had a lot of people coming at him. We're not too similar, but I get a lot of questions. I manage a lot and I enjoy it. But again, repeating, I try to manage diversity as simply as possible. There's a huge list of stuff I do. It's not just the farm. I think the art is knowing, repeating, but what to do when, what has to happen, and has that happened. There's hundreds of other things you could do. And then coming back to finding out what does work. What I like about the small scale is the fast feedback loop. And this is what Curtis recommended too. Start with the fastest crops and then broaden out. With the fast crops, you've got a lot of information to adapt to. Right. If your crop's 6 to 17 day crop turnaround, you're going to build your experience faster than if you're doing a long season crop, which is not going to work on a really small third of an acre like we're talking.
Yeah, and this is where I think I could do a whole episode on this subject because I think people fall in love with little techniques. Like I was listening to another podcast and somebody was inquiring about making their own potting soil. And I started to think it's okay, that's great to do, but on the list of things you need to do on a farm, that's probably the 500th most important thing to do because you can always just buy it off the shelf. And I forget who it was. They said something like, we don't make our own light bulbs here. And I always love that phrase. And it's right. Yeah. You buy what you buy, you make your own stuff. I get wanting to close the loop and make something better. But if you have everything else dialed in, take on making your own potting mix. But you better have happy customers, crop planning's awesome, no weeds in your field, all that other stuff, and then deal with making the potting soil. And I think as a manager, you're one, you've had employees, I'm one, and I for sure need to do a better job of this because I'm sure somebody working for me is listening to this. And it's communicating, it's knowing the vision of where you want your company to go because you're the culture setter for your business. And while every business operates under the umbrella of we have to be profitable, there's many paths to get there and to stay there. So for my job as a business owner and a manager is to know, so I know, because I don't think even a lot of business owners know, where is this business going? And is everything we're doing getting us there? This is holistic management in a way. Where do we want our life to be like? And then how do we create the conditions for that to happen? So if I know where I want my business to be, then if you run it through this context, I shouldn't do something unless it's moving me in that direction. So I have to start by knowing that. Then my job is to then communicate to my employees, partners, here's where we're trying to go. Here's how you fit into this. Your tasks fit into this by this. So the most important things you do are these things. Yes, we have to do other stuff. Sweep the floor, wash the bathroom, fix leaks once in a while. But those are just chores, not the most important thing. Because I'll often get a question from somebody who works for me is like, oh, I'd love to do this or we should do this. And I see the bigger picture. They don't, and that's my fault. But it just doesn't move the needle. It's sure that would be nice to do, but that's not going to affect anything with where I need the business to go or where I want the business to go. And that's where you can really get lost on this path to success or profitability is burning time and money on stuff that doesn't move you in that target direction. You might have a spiffier website and your social media might look more amazing if you spend more time on them. But if it doesn't increase sales, then it's a waste of creative energy, all those things, money, time, labor, and you'd be better focusing on other things. So for me this year, it's focusing a lot on customer satisfaction, increasing sales, filling in some gaps within the company. We're not launching a lot of new products. We're dramatically scaling that back down until Sumi will probably be the only thing we'll do new. So it's really focusing on that, then try and do 500 things. So I've narrowed down the scope or the lens, if you will. So as a business owner, one, if you have employees, make sure you know the vision and you clearly communicate that to them so they know what's important. And then that empowers them to make decisions because that's what you want to do as an employer is I don't want to be making decisions for you, but I want to give you the context or the framework so you can make your own decisions knowing that they'll align with organizational decisions. And then I, as a business owner, actually have to know this, though, to start. Because if I'm just thinking, and this is where new people, I know it from talking to Alex, I think at times you just get overwhelmed. Like, where are we going? We just got to keep food on the table. The lights got to stay on. And it's this Javin Bernakovic phrase of we're running, but you're looking down at the ground. So you don't even know which direction you're headed or why you're even in the race. And you can get that as a new business owner because there's so much coming at you. It's like just pure survival. But you need to find a way to, I don't know, like in the movie Sonic or something, where you just pause the world for a minute and then you can just say, all right, where are we? What are we doing? Are we going in the right direction here? What can we stop? and then realign. And I think that's super critical. And it ties into a lot of what you were saying about your experience with employees at this point and you can add extra thoughts onto this. You don't have to just answer this, but do you have that vision now for Roebuck Farm of where we want to go and what are the important things to get us there?
Sure. Yeah, so I guess our vision is to I could wind it back, farm on less land, do the same turnover, just become salad, drop everything else. I really want to explore what is the potential on our physical land, on the physical restriction of our landscape, 180 beds. Our real restriction currently is not the size of our land, it's our market streams. As we come out of the recession, as we explore new ways to sell vegetables, I think I'm really excited as to what does it look like. And every 6 months, the farm changes physically and operationally. It's interesting. You're farming all the time and you're like, oh, you don't see the progress. But as soon as you step out and step back in, you're like, wow, look at what we've achieved. And I know as we move into the 2016 series with Curtis, the farm's very different. And to cut losses and to pull out something that's not working, abandon something that worked prior as he moved forward. When he quit the farmer's market, I think a lot of growers were like, you can't do that. And he's like, I just did it.
Yeah, because
We don't know what the future looks like. I think the main thing is being able to learn from our lessons and keep adapting. We're a very different business than we were 2 years ago. And it's not been the easiest 2 years. A lot of the things that have come at us, though, have made us better.
Yeah, he mentioned that his farmer's market was starting to become saturated. Not week by week, but year over year, more and more growers were going there selling pretty much the same stuff. So and it was also a life context thing of I'm there every Saturday morning. So he was looking at eventually getting out of that, which he did end up doing. So this point came up and it hits right where you're at. Importance of diversity of market streams.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about where you're at? Because you're saying, hey, I want to go less land, salad only, but market streams are the thing. You had a recession, so restaurant sales scale back. You're one freezer in a store. You'd love to have two. I'm sure in a perfect world, you'd love to have more market streams, but it's not like they're just out there and you can just plug in. So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, or maybe fill in the gaps here. If we went back a few years to COVID, you had more market streams. COVID hit, a recession hit. Your market streams have constricted either both, I think, in terms of there's less total customers, there's less variety of customers, and they're buying less. Is that right?
With the recession, they're definitely buying less. We still have all of our original sales streams, and we're loyal to them forever. We still have all our original restaurants. Now 7 years with our restaurants, all our original retail stores, and over the years we added on start of COVID, everything temporary closed, and then we had the biggest supermarket in our town. We're still there. And then this winter we started with another supermarket. So we're currently 3 retail stores, 2 supermarkets, 6 restaurants, and then there are other potentials around. But why I like your comment from Curtis, the importance of diversity in market streams, bringing right back to that optionality thing. I'm doing a presentation soon in the South Island, and I want to talk about the processes and the optionality that make us consistent. It's not I'm a master grower, not at all. It's more the focus on the optionality and the flexibility. To win the lottery, I think you just need 6 numbers. So let's say I've got 6 different salad types. I've actually got 9. But our salad mix every day is the same ingredients. Radish microgreens, Selenova, Baby Mizuna, but we've got 4 different colors of micros, 4 different Mizunas, 2 different lettuces. There's no chance that anyone is ever going to see the same salad. And so that optionality thing is, what's the word, reflected in our sales streams as well. By having more sales streams and understanding how they work, where the demands are, it makes it easier for us to supply them. And with consignment, nobody, apart from restaurant, which is about 15, not even 20% of our sales at the moment, the only orders we have are for restaurant. We still prioritize them. And then everything else is our decision on how and when we stock the fridge, and it's consignment. There's not one, not even the supermarkets ordering, I want 90 of this item, 40 of that. That makes me restrictive, whereas by flowing the other way, that same comment again, importance of diversity in market streams, that's what gives us the flexibility. And you've got one big contract, you're crushing it, contract changes, what are you going to do?
Are you still looking at selling to a wholesaler?
We've started, and there are other wholesalers around. We just started with microgreens. We would like to go cucumbers. What we would like to see, what's not happening is we don't have the volumes. The feedback is the quality and the shelf life is phenomenal. But what's happening is they're just doing a preset order and then sitting on our product. And then 5 days later, I'll say, do you need an order? We're twice a week. They'll go, no, we've still got product. And so this is about communication. I need to have more meetings with them and navigate how could we make this work better. But they're sitting on our product rather than just ordering it and dispatching it same day. And that's really how we want it to work. We're going to play the long game with it, but right now it's very little. The potential's there, whereas the new supermarket, we're just getting smashed every 36 hours. We're stopping, and we've got one. We're in peak summer now, so we're an isolated city, but there's tourism. One of our hotels is getting crushed. One of the new chefs took over the new orders, and they do a lot of events. And so he's put our salad on the events as well. So they've more than doubled It's the only restaurant that's really up. That restaurant purchases more than the wholesaler currently. That might not stay like that forever. I guess the thing is we need to be able to change. We need to be adaptable, and that's why we should, how do I say it, implement as much optionality into our production as possible.
Yeah, what are your options if you wanted to expand your market streams? And besides stuff we've already covered, what else could you do? If you needed to add whatever the numbers, incrementally more sales. I'm not saying $50 more sales a week or $100 more sales. If you needed to add $1,000 more sales a week, like what in the wild world of what you could do in New Zealand, what are the extreme options? Could you just drive further across the island? Could you sell to other islands? I don't know how farmers markets, are they a thing? I'm not saying you want to do any of this stuff, but what else could you do to shove product out there?
We're going to long-term keep watching the wholesaling space. There's a Sunday farmers market here. Sunday is typically our day off. We could look at that. We could look at another supermarket. And then we could look at, I'm not going to drive anywhere because it's 4 hours to the next town. But we could look at most of New Zealand lives in Auckland. I think New Zealand's 5 million and over 1.5 million live in Auckland. There's a huge opportunity there. We could put product further afield. I don't have a problem with that. Currently, we just sell within about 6 miles. That's the way it works. We like being the face of the farm. Tanya, my wife, has deliveries now, and that really keeps us in touch with our clientele and our stores that we work with, keeps our finger on the pulse. And then in terms of diversification of looking outside of vegetables, we launched a beautiful tiny home 12 months ago on Airbnb. That's been amazing. And it's agritourism. People aren't coming to chase me around the farm, but everybody's, most people coming are really interested in food. We give them vegetables to eat while they're here. We make a huge effort in being hosts. Tanya's been nominated super host. So I know this is a different enterprise. If we look at Curtis, he had multiple stuff going on. So right now, the tiny home's been amazing. It's full house, it's paid for, and it's bringing in revenue stream. And when times are financially tight for everyone,
Yeah.
or whatever it is, there's I like the stacked enterprise concept.
That's a good point because obviously, like Joel Salatin says, you want to keep the main thing and not spread out too quickly. But if you're a market gardener, this doesn't mean go plant an orchard and get chickens all of a sudden if you need more money. But if you exhaust all your options for market gardening stuff, I just can't sell more vegetables without extreme things. I'm not going to go 5 hours away to a farmer's market. I'm not going to add two more farmers markets to my weekly load. Whatever it is. If you've exhausted all options, I think that point you hit on is you find something synergistic that is maybe a fairly low lift. Airbnb, Jenny Quiner does that and her farm in Iowa. It fits right in. It's low maintenance. I think they have somebody just manage it and clean it and they just collect the checks. So there are other potential things, wedding venues and other things like that you could work in. There's a farm by me that a few years ago they started doing, I think they do 4 a year here in San Diego, where they have this chef dinner and they partner with one of their restaurants and they have this huge dinner on their farm, sell really expensive tickets, make really nice food. It's all right from that farm, at least the produce part of it. And then they split the proceeds. It's work and they've slowly built it over time, but now it's a big thing. It markets their farm. It's a significant revenue source for them. Other options. I wouldn't do this in year one while you're still figuring stuff out, but eventually
Yeah.
down the line, it's if you can't squeeze more juice out of the orange, we got to get something else to squeeze to get some juice out of.
And the other comment I would make too, Diego, is nice to stack an enterprise later on. But as you're transitioning to beginning, you need to keep your current enterprise, which is probably day job.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
We're
That's the
seeing
other.
sorry,
Well,
you go.
well, that's the other option. If farming isn't cutting it financially and there's no immediate button to push, which there's usually not with a business, if you weren't making enough to support yourself, then it's take on part-time work. Maybe you consult. Can a partner in your familial unit do that? Extreme times call for extreme measures. So I would love to say, hey, there's always the ability to just go sell more, find another restaurant, find another farmer's market. But sometimes there won't be. And then if you get to that, these are other cards you can have in the deck to potentially play to close that revenue gap.
Yeah, sure.
One last thing to close it out here was this idea of the other forms of capital. Gregory Landaway and Ethan Rowland talk a lot about that. I think it's, what is it, the 9 forms of capital? I should know that, but I don't. They're going to take away my permaculture license. So when you do something, the idea behind the multiple forms of capital is you get multiple benefits. So if I farm, I get financial capital back. I sell something and money comes back to me. That's financial capital. But I also form a relationship with who I'm selling to and maybe who I'm buying supplies from to create that product. That's social capital.
Mm.
I get experience and knowledge, and that's, I don't know their exact term, but that's experiential capital. I get some form of fulfillment in my life. It feels good for me to do this, and that's another form of capital. I get to take some of that food and eat it myself, and that's another form of capital. So if you just use something in this very what's the term, reductionist view of business, where it's all about the dollars, you can miss a lot of the gains. And believe me, I'm somebody who is all profit. This is not to say do not run a profitable business. You have to run a profitable business. That's just a given underlay of this conversation. But if we're being honest, not every business works, and many businesses will fail. But in the process of failing, you may lose some money, but you'll gain all this other capital. Or you may have a year where it's a recession and things slow down, but you've gained other forms of capital, new relationships, new knowledge on how to manage things, all these other things. So don't just look at success on an income statement of how much money have we made? How many sales have we done? Look at what you're adding to your whole, because a lot of that can never be taken away from you. And it can be used in future enterprises or future jobs to put yourself in a better position. What do you think about
Sure.
that whole forms of
I think
capital?
so. If we call it social capitals, I think it's like what's what people say. It's community. Curtis had an elderly man. I think his wife came occasion too, but he lived local, and he would come and manage all of Curtis's tomatoes. But he wasn't paid. He was retired. He would take food home. And I know Curtis's leases, he didn't pay for them. He supplied them vegetables. So it's two examples where that you can't measure if you're just looking at the financial books year in and year out. And I'm sure there's lots of other examples there too. We work really hard in space with the people we work with in business, and so some examples. We feed our neighbour who turns our compost with his bobcat. The independent fishery, we give their staff vegetables and they give us fish. That's just two examples. It's everywhere through our business, and these are the things I guess the accountant doesn't see. Raw milk, friend's got a raw milk business. I can get a bucket every morning, but I'm not going to abuse that privilege. We go and help them bring in the hay. I take them vegetables. Sometimes I drop fish off to him that I get from Robin Hood. Fishery gives us fish, and I'm like, I haven't given fish to the milk guy for a while. I'll drop it to him today. It's a nice way to work, and I think there's a correlation or a nice connection between this is really, if this is working and it's easy, these are your people, and this is the same relationship I see if you're leasing land. It needs to be the same when you're leasing land. I know a lot of Curtis had what's the word? An agreement lease, but I know not all of his leases were signed documents. A lot of them are handshakes. And quite often when it's a handshake, with the good ones, you don't have to be questioning that either. So it's all about the people part, the social part. I think that's what business is about, really.
I think so too, at least for some people. Don't.
Yeah.
There's definitely people that have a different view. And I think I hit on this in a previous episode where some people's view of business is let's go, let's make a bunch of money, let's sell to another company and get it done. And that's
Seek and destroy.
yeah, that's not my view. I'm very much the lifestyle business side of things. And some business people would probably say, whatever, that's weak. But at the end of the day, it works. It supports my family. I enjoy doing it. And I think that's a big key. Throughout the years, I think Curtis's farm wore on him. And it was a lot. And I think if you don't love your business and love your customers, then you got to really seriously think about why are you doing it? Because it can't just be all about the money. If it's only about the money, eventually that rub wears off.
Yep.
And you'll just implode. And I'm at the point where, yeah, I'd always love to make more money, but it's good enough. And I love the people we deal with. And I love coming on podcasts with people like you and doing this. Like, this is not work for me. It's fun. And that's been a long time coming in my life because I've worked places where I would just go in and watch the clock, basically. So I think finding customers that you like, building community, look at all these other forms of capital, and just build the business that you enjoy that's sustainable from a business sense, and cherish that thing and just make sure it adapts as your life evolves and changes, because it inevitably will, as you have kids, as you get married, if you get divorced, as you get older, as your physical capabilities change, all those things. But that's all important. Make the business yours. Thanks for watching this episode of the Urban Farmer Rewind. If you're a farmer and you'd like to join me as a guest for a future episode of the Rewind, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to have you on and talk shop. Thanks for watching. Until next time, be nice, be thankful, and do the work.